Yeah. Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Peter asked me to give the adult meeting, so I thought I'd come up with a creative topic like the Nativity Fast, since it's the Nativity Fast, and kind of just talk through what the Nativity Fast is and isn't, and what sort of fasting is and isn't. So a couple of different things just to go through. 43 days is what we fast. The 40 days is, it symbolizes the way Moses prepared to receive the Word of God by fasting for 40 days, the Ten Commandments. And fasting has always been a way of preparation. It's just something to prepare yourself for the coming of something bigger. And then we added later 3 days to symbolize the moving of the Muqattam mountain, if any of you have ever been there. And without such a big deal that they added 3 days to that event, to the fast, to remember it. And then the date of Christmas, of course, is one of those exciting things that keeps us arguing and all the stuff. But December 25th is actually the official day. But because we celebrate on the 29th of Kiak, and there's a small difference between our calendar, the Julian calendar, and the Gregorian calendar, every, I think it's 187 years, it changes by 1 day. And so it's been changing. So it used to be December 25th, and then it went to December 26th. And probably it will continue to change, although I think what the church in Egypt is going to do is going to lock it on January 7th, just because that's the day that the government has given them off. So now January 7th is an official holiday in Egypt, so I don't think it's going to go to January 8th and 9th and all that stuff. Okay, so let's kind of talk about what fasting isn't, just very briefly get there. Keep eating less and keeping a primarily vegan diet. That's what it is, but that's not just what it is. Getting caught up in the letter of the law and believe that strict adherence to ingredients will bring us to heaven. Obviously not. The spirit of the practice is more important than what is actually eaten. And there is no threat of eternal damnation for having eggs be the eighth ingredient on your bagels, in your bagels. And then we are not doing it for God. And I think that's just important to note. And I just want to talk a little bit about sort of this, because I think as parents we have a big role to play in our kids. A lot of us have heard things, all kinds of parents say all kinds of things about what fasting is and what fasting isn't. I'll tell you, I was at a retreat once. I won't tell you which church. And the kids there were eating really terrible Siami food at the retreat, right? It's like they had these chicken strips made out of tofu. It was horrendous. And one of the kids said, actually one of the leaders said, "Man, God better reward us for this, for eating this stuff," right? And we all laughed. It was kind of funny. And then I thought about that sentence for the next 6 months, right? God better reward us for this. And it depicted to me an understanding of fasting that's just so off, right? That somehow I'm doing this for God. God's looking down at me and thinking, "Hey, you're doing a great job. Look at how strict you are. Look how focused you are. I'm going to bless you more." And I wish I could say this wasn't something I've heard from college youth all the time, but they'll often say, my parents will tell me, "Be sure to fast so you can get into medical school. Be sure to don't break the fast this time because you have a final exam." So if it's during a fasting period, if you break the fast, God gives you 8 points less on the midterm, right? Or something along those lines. And so I can gain things from God by fasting, because God will look at my fast and say, "You're a good person, I will give you blessings," right? And the word blessings here defined as Old Testament blessings of cattle, sheep, and MCAT scores, right? So, Sherry liked that one. So, I get one every once in a while, Peter, So that's the concept that I want to push back against a little bit. And then let's think about what fasting is then. And so I'm going to just kind of depart from my notes for a second here. But the way I like to think about fasting is you guys all watch football, right? And so there's a running back in football, okay? And then the running back, where's he going with this? Good question. So the running back, has to train for game day, okay? And what does a running back do to train for game day? Squats, right? Running back does squats, okay? And what day does he do it? Tuesday, right? Some other day, okay? So on Tuesday, he's in the gym and he's doing squats. Now, why is that, right? Because on game day, they'll tell you football is a game of inches. That is a true statement, right? This little short guy, and they're usually short, and they're very low to the ground, low center of gravity, hard to tackle, okay? Unless they play for Chicago, then they're easy to tackle for some reason. I don't know why that is. And sometimes they just fall down by themselves, which is beautiful. So anyway, let's focus spirituality. So this little short running back, right? On Sunday, he's going to have the ball and he's going to run into like 4,000 pounds of beef, right? And then he's going to push with everything he has to push that ball over the line, okay, the end zone. And everything he's got, he's just going to push. And if he pushes really, really hard, he can push against that 4,000 pounds of beef and move it just a few inches, enough to get in. Okay, that's what the squats are for. Okay, so now let's think about, what does this have to do with fasting? Right? Fasting is squats. Fasting is exercise. Fasting is a self-discipline, self-denial. Very important words here. Self-discipline, self-denial. Right? I do this to me. I discipline me. I hold me back. Right? And so what I'm doing is I'm training a muscle on Tuesday, right? Because on game day, Sunday, I'm gonna have to use that muscle, right? And I don't want to squat 4,000 pounds because that'll just break my spinal column, right? So what I'll do is I'll just train over and over and over again, okay? And eventually those muscles will get big enough such that when I hit the 4,000 pounds and give it everything I have, I can push it just a little bit, okay? Now what does this have to do with the spiritual life? Fasting is this exercise, right? It's an exercise in denying myself what I want and being okay with something I don't want, right? And that takes practice, and life is full of things we don't like, right? Life is full of disappointment, right? I wish I got into this school, but I got into that school. I wish I had this kind of husband, but I got that kind of husband. I wish I had these kind of kids, I got this kind of kids. All right. At least I didn't mention your name, which I thought about 2 times. I wish I'd gotten this job, but I got that job. I wish I'd gotten promoted, I got demoted. I wish I'd gotten a lot of things, but I didn't get those things, right? And life is just disappointment after disappointment. And what you have to learn how to do is, even though I don't have the thing I want, I have to learn to be okay with that and be grateful for that thing and feel blessed by that thing and find satiation in that thing, even though it's not what I wanted, right? That's life. That's Christianity, right? I have a friend who I wish I had this kind of friend. Unfortunately, I've got that kind of friend, right? The one who says these things or stabs me in the back or does whatever or talks about me or does whatever the thing is that I don't like, right? I wanted this kind of boss, and I got that kind of boss. This kind of subordinate, I wanted this kind of clergy, I got that kind of clergy, right? Life is full of this, okay? And we have to learn as Christians to fight that battle, right? To say, it's not what I wanted, but I'm going to be okay with it. And I'm going to learn to accept it and be grateful. This is the spiritual life. This is Sunday. This is game day. This is the real deal, right? Not eating steak is not righteousness, okay? It's not like God's looking down and go, wow, you really cut out a lot of things out of your diet. That's pretty amazing, right? Because when I look back in the Gospels and I look back in the sayings of the fathers and I look back in the sayings of the monks, nothing says anything about the person who cuts the most stuff out of their diet wins. Jesus never said anything like that. No one said anything like that, right? So where did we get this thing from? We got it from monks. And monks have figured out that when I work this muscle, it gets really strong. And then, important, I can apply that muscle to the real deal. right? The real deal isn't not eating, a bagel with eggs in it. That's a seventh ingredient. I buy this brand of bagels because this brand of bagels has eggs as the eighth ingredient, right? When in fact they both taste the same. That's not righteousness. God's not impressed by that, right? So what am I doing? I'm working the muscle, right? And then I can apply that muscle to the situations that aren't that great in my life, right? The tough stuff in my life, where I have to dig deep in my life and love somebody who's really quite unlovable, who's hurt me, who's done stuff to me, and serve them in a way as if they hadn't done that stuff to me. That's very, very hard to do, right? So I wanted this husband, but I got that husband. I wanted this kid, I got that kid, right? I wanted steak, but I got food, okay? And then I learned to be okay with food. And I learned to be okay with this other thing. So the church is trying to teach me at a very, very basic baby level, using food, the simplest thing, training you like, all right, practice now. I know you want this. You're going to get this, and you're going to be okay with it. And you're going to impose that on yourself and say, I won't give myself this thing, and I'm going to learn to be okay with this other thing that isn't quite as good. Now do it over and over and over again. Right? And the way fasting is supposed to work, right? It's supposed to be a strict abstinence, right? The way when Jesus said, when the bridegroom is here, so the apostles aren't fasting, but when he leaves, they will fast. The kind of fasting he's talking about is a strict abstinence. You just don't eat, right? But as fast got longer in the history of the church, we turned it from not eating into being vegan. So basically limiting yourself in a different way. Okay? And there's reasons why we picked veganism. They're not all that important. We could have picked can't eat foods A through M, but you can eat foods N through Z. You could do it a million different ways, right? But we picked this way for a variety of different reasons. So this is it, right? And so you can imagine, right? If I go to the gym, okay, and I take a half-pound dumbbell, right, and I start curling. People are going to look at me like, yeah, what are you doing? I'm saying, I'm curling. See that guy over there? He's curling too. Yeah, but he's got 50-pound dumbbells. And he's straining, and he's ripping the muscle. And you're like, yeah, but look, I'm doing the same thing. No, you're not. You got a half pound there. That's going to do nothing for you, right? Now, what is this half pound? This is all you can eat sushi during the nativity fast, right? And you meet people all the time, like, I can't wait to eat sushi. Right, and I know, I have relatives who are like, I eat fish every day during the Siyam. I love fish, and it's the best time to eat fish, and every day I eat fish. And you're like, what are we doing? Right? Like, you're getting the points, God points, whatever that means, right? And it's a win because I happen to love fish. Cool. Right? So, obviously the very wise fathers in confession every once in a while will say, oh, do you really, you really love beans? In that case, you have to eat boiled chicken, right? I hate boiled chicken. Perfect. Even better. Eat boiled chicken, right? And I remember Abuna Carrillo's talking once about even a plate of fool, right? Where you prepare a plate of fool and you make it just the way you like it with kamun and onions and tom and all the other stuff, right? And instead of just eating it and loving it, just let it sit out there. Just stare at it for 2 minutes. Don't let yourself have it, right? Constantly be trying to push back on yourself, right? I mean, even the little things, right? This doesn't have to be food. It could be coffee, right? When you realize I'm really addicted to coffee, okay, well then I will push back against myself for a day and just not have it. Why? 'Cause, right? I need to strengthen that muscle, right? And that's what the fast is all about. It's strengthening the muscle. Right? And not just going through the motion. And it's very important to realize that we strengthen the muscle not because that strengthening exercise is important, right? Nobody cares what the running back can squat. Nobody cares about what he did on Tuesday, right? That's not game day. Game day is Sunday, right? And game day is when I start interacting with people, right? And I start to see them, and they start to do things to me, and I've got to interact back in a way that befits the name of Christ, right? So this is ultimately kind of the big picture concept of what fasting is supposed to be and not. So I encourage all of you, when you talk to your kids about it, to try to instill in them, this is you against you, right? This isn't about appeasing some God who really loves fava beans, right? And, and sometimes I'll even talk to parents and they'll say, well, they have to get used to fasting. They have to get used to the food. They have to get used to it. يتعودوا. And you're like, get used to tamaya? Like, is there righteousness in having your stomach get used to falafel? Like, think about that. Like, is that your objective as a parent? I want my kid to be used to fasting food. What is that achieving? That's a change of diet, right? But I want to teach my kid to discipline themselves, and I want them to understand what's really behind the fast, right? This is an idea we got from monasticism. These guys tried it out, and it works really good. But we just have to implement it the way it's meant to be implemented. Unfortunately, sometimes we can turn it into something of our own imagination, something that isn't patristic, something that isn't biblical, something that isn't monastic, but it's me appeasing God, and God really likes me to eat falafel, so I do, right? And then if I do, then he gives me good things, and he gives me stuff, and so if I don't eat the falafel, he doesn't give me the stuff, so I have to do it. That's really weird, right? That's not Father, Son, that's not biblical in any way, shape, or form. Does that make sense? حد زعلان مني؟ أكيد. Okay. All right, so in place of food, drink, and partying, we nourish their souls with increased prayer, communion with their fellow parishioners, and drawing closer to God. For those who are struggling with personal problems, this period can give them a spiritual boost. Right? So basically, fasting is a time where I put my foot on the gas, right? Where I push myself in every spiritual way, right? Because the objective, again, isn't to be really, really good at not eating certain things, or really, really good at eating certain things, right? It's a time for me to connect with him, right? And when I can stand back and have less of me in the way, then there's just more of him for me. Does that make sense? Right? So the fast is a time where I diminish myself, my own wills, my own ego, my own pride in any way, shape, or form. I diminish me, diminish my own desires to eat what I want to eat, right? And focus on something else, right? And so every fast has a different focus. Obviously, the Nativity fast, the focus isn't so much on repentance, it's all about Christ, about the incarnation. It's about the birth. It's about this condescension of God to man. Okay. So here's some advice from Abbot Tryphon about this replacement thing. He says, fast from self-concern and feast on compassion for others. Fast from discouragement and feast on hope. Fast from lethargy and feast on enthusiasm. Fast from suspicion and feast on truth. Fast from thoughts that weaken and feast on promises that inspire. Fast from shadows of sorrow and feast on the sunlight of serenity. Fast from idle gossip and feast on purposeful silence. Fast from problems that overwhelm you and feast on prayers that sustain. Fast from criticisms and feast on praise. Fast from self-pity and feast on joy. Fast from ill temper and feast on peace. Fast from resentment and feast on contentment. Fast from jealousy and feast on love. Fast from pride and feast on humility. Fast from selfishness and feast on service. Right? So take this time, our 43 days or whatever else we have left, I think a couple of weeks left, and take the time and make this more than just like it's a time to eat all you can eat sushi. Right? It's a time to have lobster. It's a time to change my diet into something, that's a different kind of food. Make it bigger than that, right? Take the time and think about the birth of Christ and what it means for him to come. Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments? The kids are kind of coming through. I can just stop now.
I wanted to add...
Huh? Yeah.
I just wanted to add something that you mentioned that I really love, where, I think of St. John the Baptist who says, he must increase and I must decrease. So I think of that a lot during the fast. But what you said was super important at the end, where when we start diminishing our food, it's just a little sampling, where all of these other fruits of the Spirit start coming out, right? Self-control, obedience, submission, right? Patience. We start to have all of the other fruits of the Spirit. So in the wisdom of the church, I think the fast is just the beginning of like, I'm trying to develop the personality, the character of you as a Christian. So I love that part that you mentioned. Thank you, Archie.
I mean, and I will add to Henry's point is fasting is easy compared to forgiving someone you don't want to forgive, right?
What's the point of eating and you're angry?
Exactly, right? So, like, I've talked to people, who are just like, won't go to their brother's funeral, right? And you're like, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's very loving. And they hate. And then they'll be like, yeah, just give me that, you know what, you should forgive them. We should, it's been 15 years of not talking to each other, but I think it's time. You know what, hand me that falafel sandwich over there. I'd much rather eat falafel right now, right? So what we do is we take Christianity and we dumb it down. And that's the problem, right? We take something really hard, deny yourself, carry your cross, and follow me. That's really hard. And we replace it with something easy, like don't eat sushi, or don't, eat a steak. Anybody can do that, right? Now go try and forgive the person who's wronged you for 15 years, right? That's the hard stuff. That's game day. That's Sunday, right? And the worst thing you can do is the running back and say, yeah, I didn't score anything, but you should see me squat. What are we doing, right? Your squatting's great. You're really good in the gym. But what about game day? Right, so what we have to make sure is we don't settle at the level of mediocrity, right? Where we say, but I observe all of the things. The things are not the things, right? Christ very clearly, right? Matthew 25, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was, thirsty and you gave me to drink. Right? That's the real deal, right? And this is why, on Monday night we read the story of the fig tree that Christ on Holy Week. In Holy Week we read the story of the fig tree, right? It had leaves but no fruit, right? And the Fathers tell us those leaves are ascetical practices and the sacraments, right? The leaves are, I fast and I pray and I do matanyas and I go to confession, I go to communion and I read the Bible. Okay, those are the leaves. But where's the fruit? I have leaves. Not enough. He curses the tree. I need fruit. What are the fruits? I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was naked, right? That's the real deal. So don't ever stop at this mediocre level of, I'm really good at squatting, but I just don't score any touchdowns. Or you can play for Chicago. Okay, Peter, you had something to say? I think it's off.
Hello?
Yep.
Yeah. So I like the whole concept here of what you're saying, but I for me, like, I think what's different in there's something different in our faith, because many religions practice forms of fasting in terms of self-control, in terms of self-discipline. I've over the years have come to understand fasting in addition to this in a slightly different way. Fasting is oftentimes in our church paired with almsgiving. And yes, we're not, God doesn't need anything from us, but to some extent, through reading the Gospels and understanding our faith and the patristics, it becomes clear to me that love is a sacrificial love. And so to me, the way that I've framed fasting in my mind that has actually helped me along the journey is to look at it as a sacrificial offering to God. He doesn't need it, just like he didn't need anything from Cain or Abel. But when we offer God something that's a sacrifice from us, saying, I'm fasting, I know you don't need this, but I'm doing this because I love you. I'm doing this because I want my relationship with you to be strengthened. That's been a nice way for me to look at it and to get away from, especially to the kids, to just teaching them that it's about restriction and self-discipline. I mean, these are very important things, obviously, but there's a component of it that's love. There's a component of it that I'm sacrificing this from my diet, something I enjoy. I'm giving it to you, God, as an offering. You don't need it. You didn't necessarily ask for it in this way, but it is a form to me of sacrifice and demonstrating a love towards God.
I mean, look, yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I view it that way too. And anything can be that kind of the sacrifice, right? Just standing an extra few minutes at church could be that sacrifice, or the sacrifice could be just not responding to that person that you really want to respond to, right? And these are all things we offer to God. But I do want to read something. So this book is called When You Fast, it's Christian Self-Discipline. It's really a good book. It's here, and I think I got it from the bookstore. I think I stole it. And he says, along with gathering for worship, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving are the basic defining practices we undertake as disciples of Christ. And then he kind of talks about these three things, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. He says, this is because the Christian life is directed toward three focal points, God, neighbor, and our soul. Prayer orients our lives towards God. Almsgiving turns our gaze to our neighbor. Fasting, on the other hand, turns our attention to ourselves. Right? So even though I think, we can think of it as an offering and a sacrifice, and everything can be that. To me, the primary purpose becomes it's a thing that I do to me, right? And I love that he says self-discipline and self-denial and self-restriction, which kind of comes down to the question is, and something to think about with our kids is when it's forced, is it self-denial, right? Or is it self-restriction? And how do I teach them that, right? Obviously, there's age-appropriate things, right? And, when they're little, they don't understand, stuff like that. I've told this story before, I guess, but, I always think of this one time when one of my kids, it was during Lent, and they were 14 years old, and they were like, it was Saturday, there's nothing to eat. They're like, this sucks, Lent sucks, fasting sucks. The stuff we all say, right? Normal stuff. So I was like, okay, no problem. I took out 4 eggs out of the fridge. I scrambled them. I said, here you go, eat. And he just kind of looks at me, and I was like, God doesn't need your fast. And if you don't want to do it with a happy heart, don't. This is an offering. You don't want to offer, don't offer. I can't force you to offer. I can't force you to self-discipline. I can't force you to do any of these things, right? So, just having that perspective with our kids, too, will help them see what fasting is and what it isn't, But I agree. But I like the way they frame it here in this, where fasting is really a time to direct, prayer is God, almsgiving is my neighbor, and fasting is me,
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead. And then this is... Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead, Ashraf. Yeah.
Okay. There's 2 homilies by St. Basil. I really encourage everyone to read. They're both called, strangely enough, On Fasting. Homily 1 and Homily 2.
What are they about?
Huh?
What are they about?
I don't want to give it away. But he makes fun of the bears a lot. Anyway, I do want to say 2 things. Only this season that could work, but anyway, I don't want us to think, and I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but you really are, that there's such a thing as the perfect fast and the better fast than the other guy who's fasting. I don't think any human is ever going to reach a level of fasting that's perfection other than Christ, who himself fasted. And the Gospels insist on this point, that he was led by the Spirit into the wilderness and fasted 40 days and 40 nights. And we say liturgically that he fasted for us. So the only perfect fast that can be offered with whatever heart that you might have is Christ's fast if you're in him. And we can't lose sight of that. So for the kid that's fasting because he's looking for that reward in heaven, I don't want to say that's an unacceptable fast. I'm going to let God judge his heart, and it could very well be that that kid's eyes are on heaven more than my own eyes, who is so philosophically deep that I read St. Basil and I quote it at church. So I just kind of warned myself not to fall into that trap of my fasting is better and my fasting is more meaningful.
I mean,
That was my first point.
Okay, I'll get to it. Let me get you. You can have your second point in a second. But you know, I don't want to. Obviously, I'm not saying my fast is better than your fast, but there's also a piece of there's an obligation of the church to teach what fasting is and what it isn't, right? Especially in the existence of a myriad of explanations that have been concocted from a variety of traditions, including Islamic, Jewish, Hindu, name the thing, right? So I think it behooves us as a church to kind of say, well, what is the fast to us, right? And, you know, like very, very similar to what Abbot Trifon is saying, is our fast isn't just a self-denial in that it punishes the body or even just deny the body, but I deny the body, you know, as it says in Galatians, right? So the spirit can grow. Right, so it's, you know, and if you look in like the hymns of Lent, it's all over this concept of this switch, right? Like, because we always say in Lent, like fasting and prayer. You know, we'll say that a lot. And we'll say, Our Father who art in heaven, a lot. So it isn't, I'm just fasting, like self-denial, like a Hindu monk. No, it's fasting and prayer. So I'm less of me and I'm turning to him. Right? So it isn't just this restriction on me, but it's a restriction on me for the objective of less me, more him. Right? And as Henry said, he must increase and I must decrease. Right? That kind of summarizes fasting. So it isn't about, you know, I'm better than that fast, better this, you know, but more like, here's the way it, you know, here's how the church has taught us. Here's what the fathers said this thing is and it isn't. And we have the existence of, you know, I've heard dozens of things from my own family about fasting. You're like, holy moly, like, you know, stuff that's being taught. So I'm hoping to, like, I think an educational kind of approach is important, because as we teach our kids, when we give them an incorrect concept of fasting, which, you know, I'm not saying you do, but lots of people say things that are just, you know, Looneyville, the kid figures it out, you know, especially in America, right? And when he's 24, 25, he's like, that's kind of dumb. You know, that can't be it. And when they say they can't be it, that can't be it, they go one of two directions. They're like, yeah, the whole thing is bogus. Or let me go dig deeper, right? And we don't have a lot of dig deepers going. We got a lot of, this stuff is whatever. Or I fast, you know, the parents will tell them, just make sure you fast in front of everybody so that no one talks about you. Great. You know, that's it. And so then you're taught, break my fast when no one's watching, because people are the reason I fast. And then at some point I reach an age where I go, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to fake it. So you want me to be fake? Yeah, be fake. Right? So I think it's important to teach, you know, and so like some of the things you and Peter have said about like this being a sacrifice of mine, right? That's very me God specific and me specific versus me people specific, right? Second point, Usher.
I feel people, I have to let Randy speak. Yeah? Is there a mic? Do you have a mic? Or no? Randy, is there a question?
Randy has a question, everyone.
You know what's coming next.
Okay, someone's got to help with the big words. That's all I'm asking.
So I have a question. This idea of that I'm struggling with, like if we don't call it fasting, if we just call it discontentment, like I think what I took from you is you were saying that example about, you know, even eat the broiled chicken if that's the thing you don't like. So there's more of an idea of discontentment, like strive for whatever makes me a little less content. Well, maybe you disagree with that, but I kind of am hoping you disagree with that, because the second thing I was going to say is if we keep trying to achieve a higher level of discontentment, what I'm afraid of with myself is that essentially it leads to disequilibrium and that becomes unedifying for me and for everybody else around me.
What does disequilibrium mean to you?
It means not being in a place of simple contentment, because I keep trying to break myself down so much, like the example that you gave about the athlete, the person that's working out. You know, the curl of half a pound doesn't mean anything. But if I pick up a 50-pound dumbbell, I'll hurt myself, right? So, like,
Okay, but that's a slightly different issue, right? That means that's when someone says, "Hey, Abuna, I haven't fasted before, but I'm not going to eat till 6 p.m. And then when I do, I'm going to drink water and eat lentils." And Abuna says, "You know what? You don't need to pick up a 50-pound dumbbell yet. You can pick up a 10-pound dumbbell, and let's start with a fast till 9 a.m. or noon." Or so that's a slightly different thing than you hurting yourself. I mean, that's not what I'm. But I'm also saying that if it doesn't bind, then it, like I'm eating this apple fritter, right? Which we all know really isn't super yummy, but it's, we all consider it's yummy. I love these things, right? And it's perfectly yummy.
Well, I guess that's my point. So how do we get to that point where we can just find God in simple contentment? Because isn't that what the Pharisees did? They focused so much on excelling so much in the law that the law to them became a hindrance, right?
So-
and as Christ said, the law, my yoke is sweet and my burden is light. So is there a way where we can fast in just a simple way, where we can find God in simple contentment?
So
I guess that's my
I think the point of fasting, so finding God in simple contentment, I think is wonderful. That's exactly where you'd want to find Him. The way I can't find God in simple contentment is when I am so fixated on myself, right? Some of the saints say, the person that's self-centered is like a shaving of wood that curls around itself, okay? And when I'm curled around myself and me, I will never find contentment in God because I'm so self-obsessed. So the point of fasting is it has to break up things. It has to push me a little bit to get beyond myself. And once I get beyond myself, I can find contentment in a flower, in a beautiful hymn, in a piece of bread, in anything. Because, it's not like, well, I really like this kind of bread, and I really like butter, and I really like, C.S. Lewis talks about this in the Screw Tape Letters, right, when he talks about gluttony. And he says gluttony isn't about just eating too much. It's like the person who says, I have to have the perfect meal, and it has to be toasted just right. And, you see people with wine, and they're like, oh, well, this wine has to be just so. And, they do the thing where they pretend like they know it's good or bad, right? And, that's gluttony, right? That's very me-focused, very, So you're never going to be happy if all you think about is and again, food is a primary way this happens, right? But, what about vigil? I mean, the point of vigil is to break my desire to sleep. And we see the saints using it the exact same way. Stay up late. You want to sleep. The body wants rest. I won't give it what it wants. I mean, I don't know if I call it discontentment for the sake of discontentment, but I am discontenting the ego, the passions, the id, right, the lust of the flesh, the old Adam. I'm discontenting it. I'm breaking it up a little bit, right, such that I can be content with the little things. So all of those ascetic practices, staying up late and when I really want to sleep, and standing when I really want to sit, and all of those things break me a little bit. And that's good, right? That's part of the denying the self, right? The desires of the flesh, so that the little things can be contenting. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
So I think for me, it's being given the opportunity to experience God at a higher level. And if I'm just used to my own ways and my own routines, then there is no opportunity to experience God in a higher level. So it's not about self-denial to the point where you're unhappy, because you're touching God at a level you wouldn't normally have, and then the joy is there. So it's not like when when Christ said, don't be like the hypocrites that show their, their fasting through their own self-denial. They show it on their face. But it's through that discipline and self-denial that, again, we're decreasing and God is increasing in us, that the joy will be replacing that. And that's why it's so important that, like you said, it's the fasting and the prayer. Because I know when I fast and I'm denying myself, but I'm not replacing it with prayer, then I starve myself, and then my sins are even worse. So I have to replace it with something that's more filling, and the only thing that will do that is God.
I mean, and this is what the fathers say about, if you want to, make a dark room dark, you can't take darkness out of it, right? So, and this is unfortunately what we do in a lot of fasts, right? We start a lot of fasts with all these goals, right? I'm going to stop this sin, I'm going to stop this sin, I'm going to stop this sin. And what you're basically saying is, I'm going to pull out this darkness, I'm going to pull out this darkness, I'm going to pull out this darkness, and it just doesn't work, right? The only way to do that is you have to keep bringing in light, and that's the only way to remove the darkness. So otherwise you just get hangry, right? And now you're just pissed, and there's no benefit to that if nothing's replaced it. Yeah, Peter.
I moved so it looked like I'm a different person speaking, but so.
The Chicago Bears the fans are over there.
Yeah.
You're just over there.
So, no, I mean, I guess the one thing I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I think you're saying this, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, to me, the acquisition of virtue is vapid unless it's connected to the relationship of you and God, or the relationship of you and those around you. And so for me, like, there's 100 ways I can increase self-discipline or self-control or whatever the case may be, but all those things are just things of this world unless it's directed at God. And so the reason why I brought up what I did earlier was because to me it has to be relational. It can't be I'm just working on myself, I'm just trying to sin less, I'm just trying to, like, that's great, but why are you trying to sin less? What's the end game of this? And the end game of this, the beauty of coupling almsgiving, fasting, and prayer is that all these things direct you towards your relationship with God and with your brother or sister, right? So that I guess is that
Yeah, that's this slide up here, right? So this is what Christ says, right? Apart from me, you can do nothing. Right? And it's very important, like you're never going to attain virtue, and kind of to Randy's point, by going through the motions, right? Christ is the one who gives. And then Elder Paisio says, desire and effort must come from you. God will provide the power and the results, right? So always the struggle is ours, but the victory victory is His, right? The outcome is His, So yeah, I agree, 1,000%. I have more slides that would probably explain some of these questions, but I just don't want to go through them. All right. This is, again, allowing the Holy Spirit to work, right? Fasting empties the self, weakens the ego, but allows the Holy Spirit to come through, right? And it's the Holy Spirit that's doing the work, not me. I'm just getting out of the way, right, by doing it. Any other questions or comments? Excellent questions, all of you. Except for Ashraf. Okay, and glory be to God forever, amen. Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Somebody mentioned the fruits of the Spirit, and yeah. Who's happy? But I heard once in a sermon that it's not actually the fruits of the Spirit, plural, it's the fruit of the Spirit, and I just think that's so beautiful, and I always try to remind myself of that. It's not like, oh, I have to acquire this fruit, and then I have to acquire that fruit, and then I have to acquire that fruit. It's like, as you draw closer to God, all of those things come with it, and I just thought that was so.
Well, and the objective can't really be I want to be this, or I want to be that, because that could easily slip into ego, right? I want to be known as a man of prayer. I want to be known as being patient. I want to be known as being humble. I want to be known as, and so you kind of can't pick your fruit at some level, right? You just do the right things and then let the outcome, be what God has chosen, called you to be in the world. We were at the retreat this weekend, and Evangelos was saying, we were talking about the role of monks versus the role of whatever, and he said, look, we all can't be firefighters. Some people have to be police officers. Some people have to be doctors. Some people have to be ambulance drivers. So not everyone gets to do everything, right? And so it's futile to try to imitate a saint's virtue, right? And say, I want to be like that saint because they did this thing, and I want that thing. Because then that's how I want to look. That's a little bit ego-driven as well, so you got to be careful. Good? Any other questions, comments, criticism, complaints? Glory be